All right, Sam Harris. Guys, I was almost saw this really fondly today. I tweeted out that I was going to talk about Sam Harris, and some guy was just like, I forget what he said, but he was like, it's been a while. I guess it's been too long since you've taken him out of context or something. And I don't even know if the guy was being serious or not, but it was
like a flashback to 2016.
It was like a flashback to 2016. The chapter title in my book on Sam Harris is "The History is Completely Irrelevant." So Sam Harris is going to take on Black Lives Matter. And I will just say this, believe me or not, I actually soldiered through the whole thing. And it is I'm going to speak in a Harris-like fashion. I was like, it is a parade of self-aware, massive self-delusion, deep research that leads to deranged and demented conclusions, and a profound and ongoing lack of historical awareness and empathy. But let's just start by playing this one clip, and then I'll speak a little bit more broadly. But Sam was really fixated in the podcast on this idea that part of the reason that we could be having these police killings with Black people is because they've been conditioned to believe that they are in danger or being, inappropriately targeted by the police. So a big thing that just needs to happen, along with, his usual, of course there needs to be a police reform, yada, yada, yada. Police need way more training. He was super into that. This was sort of like the policy agenda of the basically like the Joe Biden platform committee, mediated through like a recently banned subreddit. All right, let's listen to Sam Harris here.
Conduct. I've seen many videos of people getting arrested, and I've seen the outraged public reaction to what appears to be the inappropriate use of force by the cops. One overwhelming fact that comes through is that people, whatever the color of their skin, don't understand how to behave around cops so as to keep themselves safe. People have to stop resisting arrest. This may seem obvious, but judging from most of these videos and from the public reaction to them, this must be a totally arcane piece of information. When a cop wants to take you into custody, you don't get to decide whether or not you should be arrested. When a cop wants to take you into custody, for whatever reason, it's not a negotiation. And if you turn it into a wrestling match, you're very likely to get injured or killed. This is a point that I once belabored in a podcast with Glenn Lowry, and essentially it became a public service announcement. And I've gone back and listened to those comments, and I want to repeat them here.
Oh my God.
This is something that everyone really needs to understand. And it's something that Black Lives Matter should be teaching explicitly.
Oh,
did you hear? That's the gem at the end.
I'm sorry, play that again. This is something that Black Lives Matter should.
Yeah, it's
what on earth?
Incredible.
This sounds like a point I belabored to Glenn. Okay.
Announcement. And I've gone back and listened to those comments, and I want to repeat them here. This is something that everyone really needs to understand. And it's something that Black Lives Matter should be teaching explicitly.
Oh, God.
If you put your hands on a cop, if you start wrestling with a cop, or grabbing him because he's arresting your friend, or pushing him, or striking him, or using your hands in a way that can possibly be interpreted as you're reaching for a gun, you are likely to get shot in the United States, right? Whatever the color of your skin.
Okay.
As I said,
and Black Lives Matter.
Like that for,
yeah, he just goes on.
So, can I just quickly say, fuck Sam Harris? All right, go
but
ahead,
also,
Michael.
just before you go, Michael, I also have to say, when he says that when a police wants to arrest you, it's not a discussion, that is the biggest lie from Sam Harris. Can you imagine a police officer detaining Sam Harris and him not trying to engage in some kind of debate with the police officer?
No, at another point in the podcast, he goes, say there's a warrant out for someone who looks like Ben Stiller. I'm pissed off because they stopped me, but I can't. I have to listen. He actually anticipated your point, David. So the only way of engaging fully in that is that other parts in the podcast, he goes into painstaking detail to try to complicate the killing of Eric Garner and the killing of Michael Brown, including, and I'm not making this up, I mean, litigating that, no, Eric Garner was not killed because of the chokehold, which, like, okay, this is so disgusting. And he also kind of glibly says to watch the video again. Like, don't watch the video again.
Fucking psycho.
He basically, so everybody who's seen this murder video, which, you know, George W. Bush was disturbed by this video, sees Pantaleo grab him in a chokehold and then get him to the ground, whereupon multiple officers are holding him down. And then Sam concedes that, you know, well, you can also die from multiple people holding their weight on you. But he feels a need to complicate that.
Nuance.
The Michael Brown case was not. In fact, there was later reporting that actually undermined the officer's self-report of what he had done after he killed Michael Brown. That's all we know. And then even in the George Floyd case, he takes pains to say it's inappropriate, it was wrong, they should be charged, but also, like, he doesn't know why he was doing it. He doesn't, and he even throws in, you know, some of the pre-existing condition stuff with George Floyd.
Okay.
And so, no, but that's really interesting because he wants to make this all about just compliance. So what he has to do is create such an insane, demented version of that even somebody literally saying, like, having a physiological response to being strangled to death, where you're not really thinking, like, well, I don't want to make a move that could be misinterpreted because I need to be complying right now. So I wouldn't, like, undulate my body while this fucking cop is strangling me.
These parade of idiots, right? Like, at least Hitchens went under the water for the waterboarding thing.
Yeah.
Every one of these IDW guys that want to concern troll BLM should take a knee to the neck for 8.5 minutes and see if they're, if they have any pre-existing conditions.
Absolutely. And another part of this thing that he said is he went into this research that is already from 2016. So I don't know if it's current, but basically the bottom line of the research was that, and I'll get to this in a second, but, like, that basically Black people are disproportionately to face every single type of police interaction besides being fatally killed. And that, furthermore, you're way more likely to have a Black or Hispanic cop kill a Black or Hispanic subject than a white. Now, I don't have time I read this research when it first came out. Sam's really into it. I don't have time, but I just want to stipulate that, like, I don't know what is so, like, even this so supposedly exculpatory research says that every other use of force is disproportionate. And that leads me to some other things that I want to touch on here. I'm quoting now from the Washington Post. The Post's comprehensive examination of police shootings showed that Black Americans account for just 13% of the population, but 1/4 of victim shootings. That's one example counteracting the research that Sam cited from an earlier time. There's ongoing and huge disproportionate response to profiling drivers. Study after study shows that police disproportionately stop African-American drivers, disproportionately search African-American drivers. A study published last month of nearly 100 million traffic stops by police nationwide found that Black drivers are more likely to be pulled over than white drivers. But interestingly, the difference becomes smaller at night when it's harder to see the race of the driver. The police's own examination. Okay, wait, I already talked about the marijuana possession arrest. 2020 study by the American Civil Liberties Union concluded that even in the era of legalization and decriminalization, there are stark racial disparities in possession arrests, with Black person more than three times more likely to be arrested for possession than a white person, even with the rates of usage are similar. And it goes on and on and on. But let me also include in this a very provocative but very well-argued piece that by Adolph Reed. Adolph Reed wrote a piece in Non-Site called How Racial Disparities Do Not Make Sense of Patterns of Police Violence. And basically the bottom line there is, of course, he does talk about the racial disparities, but then he goes into the other equation, which is that basically that, for example, 95% of police killings occurred in neighborhoods with a median family income of less than $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And that the median family incomes in neighborhoods where police were killed was $52,907. According to the Washington Post, the data of states with the highest police homicides per million population are among the whitest in the country. New Mexico, 6.71, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Colorado. And he goes on to talk about these disparities along a class line. Look at Lester Spence, had a great piece in Jacobin on police and class about this, as well as does Cedric Johnson. So yes, contra Harris, policing is deeply racist. But if you even wanted to complexify the data and look at it by other metrics, not just race alone, you would reveal a huge nationwide class problem with policing and way more police violence than need to happen to begin with. Now, of course, there's another thing in the piece where he belabored that police do not have enough training in how to use firearms and things like that. And the point is that there has been endless research demonstrating, like literally endless research demonstrating that police are trained far more in violent confrontations or even killology, one of the programs, than in de-escalation. So, I don't know. I guess it's not a surprise. But it's just, and then I'll shut up. It just ended with the most, and he goes into all these other things that we don't have time for, but it literally ends with, we're talking like 1980s style. Like he literally does the black on black crime riff at the end. And that's why, wouldn't you think they need to be more policed? Mm-hmm. So he goes into the most retrograde, racist, and stupid, and endlessly debunked. Because even that, you can break it up geographically. You can look at different, different neighborhoods, different things happen in different contexts. And then also just like the most obvious, as simple as an old Chris Rock bit. If you're in a high crime neighborhood, you drive to other places. It is the most meaningless racist trope imaginable that had sort of been I don't even hear that stuff from Fox News as much anymore. And here we have Sam Harris in 2020 thinking that he's mindfully conveying the big problem to us. It's a fucking embarrassment.
He's a debunked racism connoisseur.
That's right. And usually 20 years out of date. It's
almost honestly, I hadn't really thought of Sam Harris except for my girlfriend watches Golden Girls, but beyond that, I haven't seen him culturally. But it's almost amazing because can he really exist as a media figure if he's not towing this line, right? It's hard to imagine a Sam Harris who is all of a sudden, okay, fine, I'm taking the knee or something, right? He can't. He seems
he would take a knee if BLM's whole purpose was to tell people to comply with arrests.
Yeah, exactly.
He also, and that's another thing that he does in this is he uses examples of white people who've been killed by police, and just in the same way these fucking reactionaries do.
Yeah,
the proper answer is that yes, that's also completely unacceptable, and there is a police and racism problem, and there's a police and class problem, and there is a police that yes, even if he's really into there's several million interactions, only 1,000 fatalities. Well, in other parts of the world, as he acknowledges, there's a lot of interactions, probably less because there doesn't need to be as many interactions, period. And there is not fatalities like this. But that being said, no innocent person of any conceivable background should be killed by a cop. Yeah. I am so down for that. What is the point?
Speaking of the white guys that Sam Harris, like the guy I just think of when he was talking about don't what do you say, don't evade arrest or whatever. The guy
Don't
that was
resist.
crawling on the floor towards the cop, like confused. The one that the right-wing reactionaries always say, like, this guy was murdered by cops. And it's like, yeah, I remember that. It was fucking horrible.
It was horrifying. It was in Arizona. They fucking murdered this confused, mentally, like, I don't even know what was going on with him. That was one of the sickest things I've ever seen. And the only time these fucking people deign to mention it is to basically say, like, see, racism isn't a problem. Not like racism is a huge problem. And also, this is a problem. And wow, maybe there is a massive police problem in this country. Just maybe.
Exactly. I mean, like, and it's like, I'm sorry, that's Sam Harris's whole point, right? Is to, like, literally for somebody who, coins himself as a philosopher, he is so unable to answer the questions like what ought, right? Literally, like, he can't, like, he literally says, like, look, here's some statistics that actually say that, like, policing isn't as bad as you think it is. And also here's some practical advice so that this murdering gang of guys with guns don't kill you if they decide they need to speak to you for some reason. Like, there's no like real commitment there to say, should a society have that? The only time he ever does that is to actually, like, to foreclose that possibility. It will literally, like, his argument style is always something along the lines like, maybe should we reimagine policing? Yes, that sounds like an interesting conversation. Now, here's 10 reasons why, like, all of these police murders are actually okay, right? Like, that's like how he uses the role of philosophy in society, which should always be to tease out why the world that we live in probably is not the one that we must live in.
He uses the example of the man in South Carolina who police literally murdered, like, shot in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And that guy did face murder charge. Like, a case so egregious that the cop got Capital One, but that's like his big, like, that was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay. Absolutely. We're all on back. You shouldn't murder some guy by shooting him in the back. This doesn't even include the stop and frisk era. This doesn't, I mean, look, I'll just, a few more things and then we'll stop. New York Times examination after the death of George Floyd found that while black people make up 19% of the Minneapolis population and 9% of its police, they were on the receiving end of 58% of the police's use of force incidents.
It's ludicrous that this is even litigatable.
Well, the thing is that's incredible is that it isn't, as soon as it becomes clear that it isn't litigatable, that's when we've got black on black crime.
Right.
That's when we have the same, I mean, honestly, the type of racist mythology that we have an authoritarian, explicitly racist administration that is actually campaigning on reforming in a non-significant degree, but it is so rhetorically and historically and sociologically out of favor that, I mean, Sam Harris is basically behind some of the comms people in the Trump re-elect campaign. That's all.
Yeah. He's positioning himself for the Biden years.
Yeah.
Time to get back into that wave, baby.
And doing exactly the same thing too, because if you are, an aggrieved Sam fan, the first thing you'll say is that at many points he says we need to change policing and, we need to end the war, war on drugs. So, there's a big affection for that.
Right.
Yeah, it's just fucking incredible. It's just really, it's like I honestly, I had been not seen anything from Sam Harris since I wrote my chapter. And
nice. I
wasn't expecting anything to be good, but I really was kind of just like, has anything been like, because ironically, I mean, I don't, my thinking has changed in some ways over the past couple of years. Like I was just genuinely curious. Like, has anything been updated?
No.
Has anything like, no. Absolutely.
Yeah, he just meditates. That's why when he meditates, he just locks himself in.
Yeah. The funny part in the beginning is he's like, you may be listening to this and ask yourself, Sam, what the fuck is wrong with you? That would definitely be a soundboard if we were in studio. Sam, what the fuck is wrong with you?
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.